Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Kenai Peninsula in southern Alaska. This huge jut of land pokes into the Gulf of Alaska and extends toward Kodiak Island. It has some high mountains in the southeast of the peninsula, but near Soldotna is a low-elevation plain that gently rolls into the Cook Inlet. The towns here push into the forest, which consists of birch, hemlock, and spruce trees. Common animals here include moose, porcupines, and hares. The predators on the peninsula are much more diverse, with weasels, foxes, lynx, and coyotes rounding out the smaller meat-eaters. The larger ones are much more dangerous and include wolves, black bears, and brown bears. The Kenai River originates at Kenai Lake, which is fed by the Russian River. It flows for about 50 miles as the crow flies and empties into the Cook Inlet near the town of Kenai. The salmon that migrate upstream begin their lives as fry, which grow in Kenai and Skylac lakes before making their way to the sea for a few years. Upon their return, the salmon continue a flow of nutrients from the land to the sea and back again that sustains brown bears, as well as many other plants and animals in the ecology. This cycle on the Kenai Peninsula has supported over 600 brown bears, but these bears are genetically isolated and are trending downward in numbers, according to recent assessments. They have a unique gene pool among brown bears, which would be a pity to see go extinct. Just a little east of Soldotna is a town called Funny River. It is a dot of a town, which doesn't seem like a town at all, but more of an incorporated area. Around mile marker 11 of the Funny River Road that runs through town, a 62-year-old man named Danny had his home on an acreage. One of his favorite things to do was to take the dogs for a walk and enjoy the fresh air and beautiful scenery the Kenai River offers. Now, Danny's acreage was at an interesting location on Funny River Road. To the south is land owned by varying federal, state, and tribal agencies, which is left in its natural state. Here, brown bears can travel freely and fight and mate and do all the normal bear stuff. To the west and the east of Danny's property, housing developments and busy roads crowd the bears' access to the Kenai River and the salmon that they pull from it. But right near Danny's property, development thins, and access to the river is much easier for the bears. To find similar access to the river, the bears would have to go 6 miles to the east, just to avoid human development. This bottleneck in travel corridors creates a funnel for hungry bears and leads them on a path right to Danny's and his neighbors' doorsteps. On September 13, 2015, around 4:30 p.m., Danny was out walking the dogs along one of the many four-wheeler roads that crisscross the area. The trails make the perfect escape into the trees that surround the residential developments. Brown bears are a frequent sight on these trails, but locals are so used to being near them that their presence isn't even alarming. On his hike, Danny didn't bring a firearm, nor did he bring along bear spray. Danny was such a good neighbor, he would frequently take his neighbor's dog for a walk. The dog's name was Leila, and her owner was named Diane Deming. After Danny picked up Leila from Diane's house, the two of them disappeared into the labyrinth of quad trails for a quick escape. Diane knew they wouldn't be long, and expected them to return in about 30 minutes or so. Danny enjoyed one of the benefits of pet ownership without the responsibility of taking care of one. He often took Leila out for walks, and she seemed to enjoy them too. After he spent some time relaxing in the woods, the two of them would go back and resume their lives as usual. But today would turn out to be very different from most days. As Danny and Leila made their way into the nearby trees, another denizen was also using the quad trails. A huge brown bear was likely making his way along the Kenai River in search of salmon carcasses or berries to pack on weight for hibernation. It was mid-fall now, and if the bear didn't have enough calories, it might not make it through the winter, so every calorie mattered. At this point of the fall, bears are in a state called hyperphagia, which is a hormonal state of intense hunger and desire for food. They are known to cover much broader swaths of territory in search of food sources, and will sometimes seek food from sources they wouldn't consider in prior seasons of the year. If the berry season was poor, or the salmon run was meager, then bears would have no option but to push in closer to town in search of food. As Danny and Leila walked down the quad trail, at some point they crossed paths with this massive brown bear. The details of just how this run-in occurred have not been relayed or made public. The results of the incident left Danny with grievous injuries and sent Leila dashing back to Diane. At 4:36 p.m., Diane heard Leila scratching at the back door. Before she could let Leila in, she heard her scratching at the front door. Diane hurried back toward the front door and let Leila inside, but Danny wasn't with her. Diane thought that perhaps he'd let her run ahead of him, so she glanced down the road, but couldn't see Danny. After a few minutes, her questions were answered, as emergency vehicles began to blare their sirens and converge on a nearby location. There was no way Diane could know, but a brown bear had attacked Danny while he and Leila were out for a walk. After Danny was severely injured, he somehow managed to pull out his cell phone and call 911. The sirens Diane heard were responding to his own request for help. First responders were sent out to the attack location at 4:45 p.m., and the first unit arrived by 4:58 p.m. Although their description of Danny's injuries was not detailed, they were described as very serious. It took the paramedics only 5 minutes to request a medical helicopter to Danny's location. It ferried him to a hospital in Anchorage, where he was held in critical condition. Danny went through his first surgery there on Monday. With injuries beyond their scope of care, the hospital in Anchorage arranged for an emergency medical flight, which took Danny to Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, Washington. After arriving at Harborview, additional surgical procedures would be completed to close and repair tissue damage the bear had done to Danny. Wildlife officers quickly converged on the attack site and searched for the bear responsible for Danny's mauling. Even though the search was thorough, it was fruitless in finding a bear in the area. Authorities decided to adopt a strategy of waiting out the bear to see if it would return and pose further risks to residents of the area. After the bear didn't return, they concluded that the attack was likely defensive and the bear didn't have predatory motives in attacking Danny. According to Danny's wife, his recovery was slow but steady. Given his proximity to town and access to immediate medical attention, his life was saved. Events could have ended up very differently for him if he were only a few miles away from the resources needed to save his life. From the time Danny left Diane's house with Leila to the point he called 911, only 6 minutes had elapsed. He was located a quarter mile from his home, which means most of that 6 minutes was spent walking with Leila and not being attacked by the bear. In only a few seconds, this bear did enough damage to Danny's body to threaten his life, in a location that would make the thought of this scenario unlikely. Due to the rapid response and availability of medical attention, he survived. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Do you think bear spray would have prevented this attack? I kind of doubt it. Do you think Leila's presence may have been a contributing factor in the attack? Is the development around Kenai River an example of poor planning? The next time you take your dog out for a walk in the woods, will you be packing bear spray or a firearm? I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us back to the same location as our prior episode, the Tuscarora Trail Overlook in Duthat State Park in Virginia. The steep hills of this park are packed with dense, mixed forests of evergreens and deciduous trees. The deciduous trees drop their leaves each fall, which forms a crunchy and insulating layer along the ground. This layer performs an important function in the habitat, but we will not get into that in this video. The evergreen trees here include pine, fir, spruce, and hemlock trees, which create a dark environment that allows predators to sneak up on prey very easily. With white-tailed deer and turkeys wandering the underbrush, life here is easy for the bobcats, coyotes, and black bears with plenty to eat. As reported in the prior episodes, Virginia hosts 17,000 black bears, which is likely not going down, despite the state's broad hunting seasons. Unlike black bears in the western states, bears in Virginia are almost always black in color, and they lack any variation in their color. On the afternoon of September 17, 2017, a woman whom we will refer to as Carol was out for a relaxing hike through the beautiful mountains of the park with her 2 dogs. Duke and Daisy trotted along the trailside, sniffing anything that presented an alluring scent and obediently answering Carol's calls to them. For several miles, the dogs kept Carol company and alertly watched for anything that interested them. They undoubtedly smelt deer and raccoons as they braided their paths along the trail, but on this day, one scent seemed to elude their sensitive noses for an unknown reason. Spending much of the day making their way toward the overlook just past the peak of the trail, Carol and her dogs were now a few hours and numerous miles into their hike. I could find no source confirming that Carol carried bear spray or a firearm on this hike, so it is believed she carried neither. Sometimes as people and dogs get tired, they begin to lose attention to fine details. At first, hikers are alert and watching for anything out of place or different. After a few thousand steps, important clues may be missed. As Carol and her dogs approached the overlook about 1 p.m., they must have walked right past a very dangerous observer concealed by the brush near the trail. It isn't clear whether the black bear had followed them unnoticed down the trail or if it had suddenly appeared behind them. Hiking down the trail, Carol was staring ahead of her when she was driven forward and onto her face. The impact came from nowhere and briefly disoriented Carol, but the searing pain and pressure of a hungry black bear's teeth being driven into the flesh of her lower leg brought her back to reality. As Carol rolled to her side, she could see a black bear latched onto her leg and started to kick at the bear with her other leg. As the bear slashed her legs with its paws while it tried to fend off her kicks, the puncture wounds in her legs tore and bled. After a couple of well-placed kicks to the bear's head, it switched its attack to her other leg. It caught her lower leg in its jaws and shook its head to set its teeth deep in her flesh. Thoughts of what to do must have raced through her mind as she determined how to handle this violent attack. Carol kicked and yelled as the bear bit into her legs over and over while it clawed and gashed them. She knew this bear was not defending itself, as it came from behind to attack her. Realizing this was a fight for her life, Carol resolved to fight to the end. As the bear bit and tore at Carol's legs, her dogs ran around, barking and charging toward the bear. Their dashing and darting confused the bear and distracted it from killing Carol. With so much energy and resistance, the bear's resolve began to wane. It released its grip on Carol's legs and darted back into the brush, leaving her bleeding and in pain on the ground. As her dogs chased after the bear a short distance, Carol pulled herself together. The last thing she knew, she was enjoying the beautiful scenery, and the next thing she knew, she was sitting here after such a sudden and brutal attack. Carol pulled her legs underneath her and stood to her feet. The adrenaline had dulled the pain of the puncture and claw wounds on her legs, but that didn't last. She could see her blood trickling from wounds that hurt, and wondered if she should sit and wait for another hiker to come along, or risk returning down the same trail she'd just been ambushed on. After some consideration, she knew that waiting would leave her in the same area as the aggressive bear, and that was a risk she was unwilling to take. She decided that enduring the pain she felt with each step was more tolerable than the thought of waiting. Slowly, Carol began working her way down the trail while calling to her dogs. They'd returned from chasing the bear and seemed uninjured. After a few hours of painful limping her way down the trail, Carol emerged at the trailhead and her vehicle parked there. Somehow she managed to get through to emergency services and requested first responders to her location. Carol was transported to the same hospital that Laura Cooksey was treated at, Lewis Gale Hospital, Allegheny. Her gashes and puncture wounds were cleaned and closed with an undisclosed number of stitches after she was transferred to the Roanoke Memorial Hospital. Over the next few weeks, Carol would make a full recovery. Wildlife officials would initiate a comprehensive search for the bear, and due to the predatory nature of the attack, decided it would have to be euthanized. DNA evidence from the bear was collected from Carol's wounds for comparison with other bears they suspected of her attack. They noted that rabies could be a factor in Carol's attack. During Carol's recovery, the park system took care of her family cabin in the area and her dogs. They expressed wishes for a speedy recovery for her after experiencing such a violent, unprovoked attack. Officials closed the trails in the park as they searched for the bear. There was no indication in any of the sources I could find on this attack whether the bear was ever located or killed. Following the attack, officials released a public announcement advising hikers and campers to remain calm if they encounter a bear. They also stated that hiking during dawn or dusk hours may increase the likelihood of running into a bear. Making noise near streams and brushy areas may help avoid surprising a bear. Keeping your children close to you may ensure their safety. When you confront a bear, appear as large as possible and make noise while retreating slowly. Given Carol was hiking when she was attacked from behind, this advice had limited value in preventing it. She was ambushed at midday and wasn't near a stream or an area of dense brush, or at least any more dense than the rest of her surroundings. A predatory attack like this one has an element of unpredictability, and no amount of precaution or preparation would have prevented it. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. What could Carol have done differently to avoid or prevent this attack? Is Virginia developing into a hotspot for bear attacks, like other regions? Why didn't Carol's dogs pick up on the bear's presence before it attacked her? What do you think you would do if you were thrown to your face by the impact of a surprise bear attack? I'll be glad to read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Appalachian Trail, near a town called Glasgow, Virginia. The AT, as it is known in hiking circles, starts, or ends, at the peak of Springer Mountain, on the border of Fannin and Gilmer counties in North Georgia. It winds its way through the states of Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire, and ends in Maine. Most of the states that the AT goes through have bear attacks that have been featured on one episode or another on our channel. It covers 2,198.4 miles, and most of those miles are through prime bear habitat. The trail hosts about 3 million hikers each year, and most of those are day hikers. Through hiking, by contrast, is hiking the entire trail in one 12-month period from beginning to end. It requires much more planning and discipline, as coordinating the supply drops and support materials can be logistically challenging. As you can imagine, the topography and geography of the trail varies, but primarily consists of steep peaks and trails piercing through thick forests of pine, maple, fir, oak, spruce, and hickory. The undergrowth over most of the trail length is so thick that visibility is limited to under a few yards in much of it. Animals that you may run into while hiking include white-tailed deer, elk, turkeys, and a myriad of smaller animals like skunks, possums, and raccoons. The predators along the AT include bobcats, coyotes, and black bears. Near the tiny town of Glasgow, Virginia, the AT crosses the James River. Due to the proximity of the town, AT hikers often stop there to stock up on supplies before continuing on their trek. Resting near a restocking location allows some hikers to refresh not only their supplies, but also their spirits. They pitch their tents and campsites dedicated to them along the trail and approaching the town. Lilliantown were AT through hikers and were about 2 months into their hike when they reached the area around Glasgow. The month was May 2023, but as you can imagine, after hiking for 2 months, the pair had no idea what the precise day of the month was. Given that weather doesn't always cooperate with hiking plans, and motivation varies day by day, the couple didn't generally hold too tightly to reaching their waypoints in their planned route. Taking it day by day and camping in enchanting places instead of your planned locations add to the freedom and adventure of the experience. On the day in question, the hikers had reached their last big climb of the day by late afternoon, and were searching for a place to pitch camp for the night. Hoping to cover a few more miles before that, they decided that they would pitch camp around 7:30 p.m., wherever they found themselves to be. Previously in the day, they'd crossed a road to re-enter the trailhead where they'd met up with some hikers headed in the other direction. As they passed each other, the hiking group conveyed that the campground known as Matt's Creek Shelter was closed due to a bear being seen in the area. Lilliantown thanked the hikers for their information and continued on their way up the trail. Given that their waypoints weren't etched in stone, Lilliantown weren't exactly sure how far Matt's Creek Shelter was. They weren't sure if they were even planning on staying there, but decided to cross that bridge when they got to it. Bear activity was a common topic of conversation for the hikers on the AT, so the fact that it was mentioned didn't draw too much attention from either of the hikers. They'd already passed several signs relaying the fact that bears had stolen food caches suspended from trees, so reports of bear activity were not as alarming as they should have been. Now, Matt's Creek Shelter lies on the west side of the James River. Lilliantown were close to pitching camp for the night, and it was the nearest campsite to them. Their options were to stop before Matt's Creek or to cross the river before pitching camp. As they hiked, they passed a beautiful campsite, which was still outside the boundary of the closed portion of the trail. The campsite had a great view of the James River and was technically outside the closed area, but only by a little bit. The day's hike was grueling at times, and rolling out their bedrolls on the thick layer of pine duff was all too comfortable. Lily and Town wolfed down their dinner and cached their food about 50 yards from their campsite, safely out of the reach of any hungry bears. The method they used to cache their food bag is called the PCT method, named after the recommended method used along the Pacific Crest Trail. It requires suspending your food bag over a high limb no lower than 12 feet from the ground. The cache should be more than 6 feet from the tree trunk and 4 feet lower than the branch to prevent bears from climbing the tree and pulling the rope toward themselves. For those of you who are interested in learning this caching technique, I've linked to an instructional video in the video article below this video. On a side note, rangers along the trail system have noted that bears have watched hikers as they cache their food bags. They've learned that untying the knot tethering the cache to the base of the same tree can yield free meals. The PCT method of caching can disrupt this learning-based reward system, even though it may take up to 30 years for the bears that have learned this lesson to fade from the population. At about 8:45 p.m., Lily and Town settled into their sleeping bags as the darkness chased the last bit of twilight from the evening sky. The nighttime noises of the forest surrounded the hikers, and their slumber had only started by the time it was unceremoniously interrupted. A little after 9 p.m., Lily was awakened by the sound of heavy, deep breaths through her tent and very close to her face. Hoping it was part of a dream, she froze and listened to confirm her fears. The sound of sniffing disrupted her consolation and was followed by the sound of very heavy footfalls, which made their way around the tent. Judging by the thud of the footfalls, Lily knew this was no small animal. It could only have been a large bear. She shook Town from his sleep and told him there was a bear outside their tent. The two raised a chorus of "Hey bear" for over a minute, hoping that it would be all the animal would need to be convinced to leave them alone. Each chorus was followed by attentive listening, as the hikers eagerly awaited for the sound of departing footfalls. As soon as the bear heard the humans, it was likely perplexed by its lack of ability to visually locate them. It huffed loudly and stomped toward them, but given it didn't see them, stomped on the ground at the edge of their tent. It seemed the bear was trying to flush them from their hiding spot by bluff charging them. Given the bear didn't immediately crash through the brush in a hasty departure, Town knew this was a bad situation. He ordered Lily to call 911. After barking out the order, he reached over to retrieve his knife and a whistle he carried in his backpack. Lily pulled out her cell phone and had somehow managed to get 2 bars of reception. The location they chose was narrowly sufficient to place the call for emergency services. Town stammered out that this wasn't a normal bear, as it wasn't scared of them. He blew loud blasts from his whistle and thumped on the tent poles to frighten the bear away. Lily would be connected with the Blue Ridge Parkway deputies for the next 90 long minutes. Now, usually when a caller dials 911, they're in or near a house, road, or other landmark they can relay their location. Lily and Town were out in the woods, and realistically beyond the typical service area of first responders. The dispatchers went back and forth with Lily, trying to understand exactly how responders could get to them, but they were not familiar with the trail and its intricacies. After ironing out the hikers' rough location, dispatch sent responders to the camp, but they were at least 30 minutes away. Lily and Town were instructed to stay inside their tent, but expressed that they were not comfortable staying inside it because they couldn't see the bear. They thought that trying to make it back out to nearby Highway 3 would be a safer bet, but they were overruled by the dispatcher. If responders could not locate them, they would not be able to ensure the safety of the hikers. As responders scrambled to round up a means to reach the hikers, the bear huffed and chuffed at them through the tent fabric. The hikers positioned themselves as far away from the tent edges as possible and huddled in fear as the time passed slowly. As they waited for responders, Lily received a call from the wildlife officer. The officer inquired about where their food was cached, and Lily explained how they'd stored it. After confirming it was cached properly, the officer asked where they had cooked their food in relation to their tent. Lily explained that their cooking location was only about 10 yards from their tent. After receiving that information, the officer asked them if there was any way they could cover up that location with something. The officer's next line of questioning was regarding protection. He asked them if they'd brought a firearm along with them. Lily indicated that they only had a knife. The officer advised them to take the knife and a few other things to throw at the bear as they left the tent. After all, the bear shouldn't be interested in eating the people, only wanted the food it smelled. By this time, Town's headlamp was out of battery power, as was his cell phone, while both of Lily's devices were just about there. The couple had decided that staying in the tent was a greater risk than leaving it. They planned to quickly hike their way through the dark to Highway 3, where help would be waiting, hopefully. Lily gathered 2 water containers and the knife sheath to throw at the bear as they made their escape from the tent. They planned for Town to leave the tent first, closely followed by Lily and her headlamp. Looking around, Town couldn't locate the bear in the darkness. Lily emerged from the tent and immediately located it using her headlamp. It was standing only 15 feet away, sniffing the ground. Lily began launching her impromptu projectile collection in the bear's direction. As each item landed near it, the bear showed little to no reaction. The only reaction the hikers got from the bear was a blank and prolonged stare. Lily and Town backed away from the bear and toward the bushes that lined the trail on their escape route. The bear didn't do anything but watch them as they slowly made their way. As soon as the bear disappeared from their sight, the hikers took several quick steps in the opposite direction before they heard a rustling from the bushes nearby them. The rustling noise was not coming from their campsite, but from the opposite direction. The hikers watched in horror as a second black bear stepped onto the trail, only about 20 feet from where they stood. Lily was still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher and let fly a few expletives as she saw the second bear. At this point, Town was carrying his knife and empty backpack, while Lily had only her dying phone and headlamp. The dispatcher relayed instructions to the hikers to back slowly away from the bear, while keeping an eye on it. This was the start of a terrifying game of cat and mouse. As the hikers slowly crept backward down the trail, the bear maintained their pace. It stayed the same distance away from them as they went. Lily relayed the bear's persistence to the dispatcher, who asked them if they had anything with scent they could drop. The only thing that they could afford to lay down was Town's backpack, so he placed it on the trail, and they slowly retreated from it. As the bear lumbered toward Town's backpack, it lowered its nose to it. It sniffed quick puffs and then raised its head once again. An agonizing sensation took over Town and Lily as they watched the paws of the bear reach past the backpack and in their direction. Lily began to lose her composure after watching the bear continue past the backpack. Her excited and fearful tone relayed to the dispatcher that the bear was still following them and that they had nothing it could want. But she was thinking that this was a typical bear and not a bear considering humans as prey. That is when one of their few remaining connections with the outside world collapsed. Lily's connection with the dispatcher had dropped, and with it the hikers' spirits. A sensation of unfairness washed over Lily as she considered that they had done everything to distract the bear. It couldn't possibly be interested in humans as food, but could only be interested in them as a food source. What more could it want? They dropped everything with a scent that attracted the bear. It was at this point that the hikers noticed that the bear was slowly closing the short distance between them. Town positioned himself between Lily and the bear. His 3-inch knife blade would be very little protection against an animal whose hide was designed to resist claws of about the same length. He continued to yell at the bear, and his voice was getting hoarse as they continued their retreat down the trail. The desperation the hikers were feeling mounted as the bear stalked to within 8 feet of them. That is when Lily realized that Town's knife wasn't the only weapon they could use to defend themselves. She noticed they were standing on a very rocky part of the trail and bent over to retrieve a handful of golf ball-sized rocks. Taking his cue from Lily, Town reached down and grabbed his own small arsenal of rocks. The hikers began pelting the bear and likely didn't miss much from only 8 feet away. At last, a break in the focus of the bear appeared as it retreated a short distance up the trunk of a tree along the trail. Town and Lily used this break in the bear's stalk toward them to put more distance between him and them. After only a few seconds, the bear dropped back down to the trail and continued its methodical stalk toward the hikers. Now having formulated a rudimentary strategy to defend themselves, the hikers played out their role in a play that had likely been performed countless times over the eons. The bear would advance on them, and they would throw rocks at it, driving it back from them. With each rock that thumped into the bear's ribs, they could see it begin to doubt whether stalking them was worth the risk, but it continued to return nonetheless. The shortest route to the protection of civilization took Lily and Town right through the closed section of the trail and past Matt's Creek shelter. Lily would glance back behind them as they hiked and noticed that the distance between them and the bear's glowing eyes was increasing. By the time the hikers had crossed the bridge and climbed the shoulder on the side of the highway, they'd covered 3 miles while being stalked by the bear. They glanced up and down the dark highway, hoping to see a waiting deputy, but there was nothing. There was no cell reception either, so calling for help was out of the question. It was now about 11:15 p.m., and they knew their only option was to head toward Glasgow, so they began hiking through the dark. At least they felt safer hiking along the road. There would certainly be someone driving by soon, and hopefully they would get a ride into town. It wasn't long before headlights appeared from around the bend, and Lily waved her cell phone, hoping to get the car to pull over. It roared right past them, likely too afraid to pick up hitchhikers in the middle of the night. Town was still carrying his knife in his hand when another car appeared coming from the opposite direction. The driver pulled over to the shoulder and asked Lily to approach his vehicle, likely uncertain of just what was going on with them. After some serious consideration, the driver confessed that he couldn't leave them out here in good conscience, and agreed to take them to town. Lily and Town managed to secure a sleeping spot at the hostel in town called Stanimals. In the morning they met with Ranger Brian Wilson. They all agreed to go back to their campsite to retrieve their backpacking gear they had discarded in their retreat. Ranger Wilson grabbed his pump-action shotgun loaded with slugs, and the trio headed up the trail together. About a half-mile from their previous campsite, the ranger pointed out some food wrappers in the trail. Lily sheepishly explained that those were hers, and she'd discarded them as the bear followed them down the trail the night before. Continuing up the trail, the group located one of Town's shoes. It had a clear puncture hole through the toe where one of the bears tested its taste. A short distance further they found Town's backpack he'd discarded in the trail to distract the bear. The same one they had watched the bear step over as it stalked them. His pack was now torn up and its contents strewn about. As the group climbed the remaining trail section of their campsite, they began to wonder what damage may have been done to their belongings. Upon arriving, they could see that their food cache was completely untouched, and the ranger indicated that their food was properly cached, possibly too well. It appeared that the bears had opted for easier food than the food cache offered. Upon examining their tent, they could see both of the hikers' sleeping pads were punctured, and Lily's toiletry bag was ripped apart and scattered just outside. Their sleeping bags were slashed in places, and Town's more so than Lily's. The tent had clear claw marks from the bears' paws striking at it after they'd fled. As Ranger Wilson took pictures of the campsite, he pointed out that just beyond the tent's ground cloth was a large bear print in the duff. He indicated that this situation was very dangerous and may have ended up very badly for the hikers. He informed them that they were nearly a Netflix documentary. Reacting to the aggressive nature of the bears, AT authorities increased the closed area to keep people from entering the bears' location. Ranger Wilson indicated that the bear near their tent was a large sow, and that the bear that had followed them through the trees was a 2-year-old bear. It was likely not as big as the sow, but certainly large enough to harm or kill unarmed people. Trail authorities decided to wait until the berry season started before relocating the bears. Given this was the second time they'd responded to these bears behaving aggressively toward hikers, their actions may be too little, too late someday. Lily and Town continued on their AT adventure through the next few nights, though the next few nights were not comfortable, given that they had to sleep on their deflated sleeping pads. Lily blogged about their hike along the AT, and if you are interested in reading it, I've linked to it at the bottom of the video article below. I'm sure they would appreciate any support you care to offer. After reviewing the details of this episode, I have a few questions for you. Given that the bears returned to the items Town and Lily discarded, do you think that indicates a predatory nature to this confrontation? Would you have remained in the tent or fled? Would you have finished hiking the AT after having such a harrowing run-in with bears? I will gladly read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.